The man who refused to unsee. There is a pressure that comes after the miracle, not during it, not before it, after. When the extraordinary thing has happened and the dust has settled, and the people around you have had time to process what occurred. And some of them have decided, for reasons that have everything to do with their own interests and very little to do with your experience, that it would be more convenient for everyone if you would quietly walk back what happened. Soften it, qualify it, introduce enough doubt into your own testimony that the people who are threatened by it can exhale and return to the version of reality they were comfortable with before your life became inconvenient evidence of something they cannot control. Most people, when that pressure comes, comply. Not because they are cowardly, but because the pressure is enormous and the people applying it are powerful, and the cost of maintaining your testimony in the face of institutional resistance is a cost that most of us were never prepared to pay. So we soften. We say, well, it might have been this or it might have been that. We introduce the ambiguity that wasn't there in the original experience, because ambiguity is safer than clarity when clarity is making powerful people uncomfortable. Today, I want to spend time with a man who refused to do that. A man who had every social and religious incentive to unsee what he had seen, to unknow what he had come to know, and who stood his ground anyway, with a simplicity and a courage that I believe is one of the most underappreciated models of faith in the entire New Testament. His name we are never told. He is known only by his condition and his healing. The man born blind. And his story is in the 9th chapter of the Gospel of John, and it is one of the longest, most detailed, most carefully constructed healing narratives in any of the 4 Gospels. And the reason it is so long, I want to suggest, is not because the healing was complicated. The healing was almost abrupt in its simplicity. The reason the story is so long is because of what happened afterward. Because what John wants us to see is not just the miracle. He wants us to see what a healed person looks like when the world around them needs the healing to be undone. Let me take you back to the beginning. Jesus and his disciples are walking, and they pass this man, blind from birth, sitting presumably in the place where he always sat, doing the only thing available to him in that culture and that condition, which was begging. And the disciples ask Jesus a question that tells us everything about how theological frameworks can become instruments of cruelty when applied without humanity. They ask, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, I want to sit with that question for a moment, because it is not a malicious question. The disciples were not bad people. They were working from within a framework that their entire religious upbringing had given them. The idea that suffering is always traceable to specific sin, that pain is always punishment, that a person's condition is always a commentary on their character or the character of those who came before them. It was a tidy framework. It made the world legible. It gave suffering a cause and therefore, implicitly, a solution. If you could identify the sin, you could address it, and the suffering would resolve. The problem is that frameworks built for tidiness are almost always built at someone's expense. And the expense, in this case, was paid by every person who sat in their suffering being told, by the logic of the system itself, that they were there because of something they or someone they loved had done wrong, that their pain was their fault, that their condition was their consequence. And Jesus dismantled it in one sentence. He said, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him." Now that answer has been misread in 2 directions, and I want to navigate carefully between them. Some people read it as though God designed this man's blindness as a prop for a future miracle, as though 30-something years of darkness and begging were simply a divine stage setup for a moment of display. That reading makes God into something I do not recognize as the Father of Jesus Christ. The other reading is more careful and I think more faithful, that Jesus was not explaining the cause of the blindness, but was refusing to engage with the disciples' framing altogether. He was saying, stop looking backward for someone to blame and start looking forward for what God is about to do. The question is not who caused this. The question is what is possible from here. And then he made mud, which is itself a remarkable detail. He could have healed with a word. He had done it before. He could have healed with a touch. But he bent down and made mud from the ground and put it on the man's eyes and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. And the man went, without argument, Without demanding a better explanation, without asking what the theological mechanism of this particular healing method was, he went, he washed, and he came back seeing. And here is where the real story begins. The neighbors were the first to respond, and their response is disorienting in a specific way. Because instead of celebration, the primary emotion is confusion. Is this the same man? Some said yes, some said it only looks like him. And the man himself stood in the middle of this debate about his own identity and said with quiet, almost bewildered clarity, "I am the man." Not, "I think I am," not, "I might be," "I am the man." He was more certain about who he was than the people who had known him his whole life. And that certainty, I want to suggest, is itself a kind of gift that genuine encounter with God produces. A clarity about your own identity that external debate cannot dislodge. Then they brought him to the Pharisees, and here the pressure escalates, because the Pharisees noticed immediately that this healing had happened on the Sabbath, that Jesus had made mud and healed on the day when such activities were prohibited by their interpretation of the law. And the theological crisis this created for them was real. Because if Jesus was from God, the Sabbath violation was a problem. And if the Sabbath violation disqualified him, then the healing created a problem. They could not hold both things in their framework simultaneously, so they chose to attack the healing rather than revise the framework. They asked the man, "What do you say about the one who opened your eyes?" And the man said, "He is a prophet." Then they called his parents, and this is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire narrative, because the parents confirmed that yes, this was their son, and yes, he had been born blind. But when pressed on the question of how he now saw and who had done it, they deflected. They said, "He is of age, ask him. Ask him yourself." And John tells us why. Because the religious authorities had already decreed that anyone who acknowledged Jesus as the Christ would be expelled from the synagogue, and his parents were afraid. And so they handed the question back to their son and left him to stand in front of the institution alone. I want to be compassionate toward those parents. Fear is real. Institutional power is real. The threat of expulsion from your entire religious and social community is not a small thing. It was, in the ancient world, something close to social death. I understand why they stepped back, but I also want to notice what it cost their son. Because in the moment when he needed his own family to stand beside him and confirm what had happened to him, they left him alone with it, and he still did not unsee. The Pharisees called him back in, and now the pressure became explicit. They said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner," which was not an invitation to worship. It was a demand to recant. Give glory to God, meaning acknowledge that the healing came from a legitimate, institutionally approved source, or acknowledge that it didn't happen at all. Stop giving credit to the man who violated our Sabbath. Revise your testimony in a direction that is compatible with our conclusions. And the man born blind said something that has echoed through 20 centuries of theology and courage and testimony. He said, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I know, I was blind and now I see. One thing I know." Not a comprehensive theological defense, not a systematic argument, not an attempt to resolve the Pharisees' Sabbath dilemma or to enter into the debate about whether Jesus was a sinner. Just this. One thing. A single, irreducible, experience-grounded fact that no institutional authority on earth could revoke. I was blind and now I see. You can debate the mechanism. You can question the method. You can interrogate my parents and review my history and construct whatever theological framework you need to protect your existing conclusions. But you cannot take away the fact that I am standing here in front of you, and I can see your faces, and this morning I could not. That sentence is a fortress. And it is a fortress available to every person who has had a genuine encounter with the living God and has subsequently been pressured to doubt it. Now the Pharisees pressed harder. They asked again, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And the man answered with a flash of wit that I find genuinely remarkable given the circumstances. He said, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Do you also want to become his disciples?" There is a courage in that sentence that takes your breath away. This is not a man who has had years to process his theological position. This is a man who was blind this morning and is navigating an interrogation by the most powerful religious authorities in his world this afternoon. And he is being sharp. He is holding his ground. He is even in a moment of pressure that would have silenced most of us, allowing himself a flash of holy irony. They expelled him, cast him out of the synagogue, the very thing his parents feared for themselves, the son absorbed alone. And when Jesus heard that they had cast him out, he found him. And this is the detail that I want to hold until the very end of this reflection, because I think it is the most important movement in the entire story. Jesus sought him out. After the expulsion, after the institutional rejection, after the loss of the community he had been part of his entire life, Jesus found him, and he asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. He lost the synagogue and found Jesus. He lost the institution and found the living God. He lost the approval of the most powerful religious authorities of his day and gained something that none of those authorities could grant or revoke. And I think that is not an accident. I think Jesus found him because that is what Jesus does for every person who pays the price of maintaining their testimony in the face of institutional pressure. He shows up. He finds them in the aftermath of the expulsion. He does not let the ones who stood their ground stand alone. So let me bring this into your life today, because I believe there are people carrying a real experience of God, a moment, a season, an encounter that changed something in them at a level no argument can reach. And the pressure to unsee it is coming from somewhere. Maybe from a community that needs you to be who you were before the change. Maybe from a family that is more comfortable with the blind version of you than with the seeing one, because the seeing version asks different questions and makes different choices and will not go back to sitting by the road. Maybe from an internal voice that has been trained by disappointment to distrust its own experiences of grace. I want to say to you what the man born blind demonstrated in that interrogation room. You are not required to resolve every theological question that your healing raises in order to defend the fact of the healing. You are not required to have a comprehensive answer for every objection before you are allowed to stand in what you know. You do not have to win the debate. You only have to hold the one thing. One thing I know. Find your one thing. The moment that changed. The prayer that was answered in a way you cannot explain. The peace that arrived in the circumstance where peace had no business being. The way you know that something happened. Not because you can prove it to a room full of skeptics, but because you were there and they were not, and the mud was on your eyes and then it was not, and the darkness was your entire world and then it was not. Hold that. Let them debate the mechanism. Let them question the source. Let them interrogate your parents and review your history and construct their arguments. You hold the one thing, because the one thing is not an argument. It is a testimony. And a testimony does not require a degree to give or a debate to win. It only requires the courage to keep saying, "I was blind and now I see." Whatever that means in your specific and unrepeatable story. And here is what I promise you on the authority of this 9th chapter of John. The one who gave you the sight will find you in the expulsion. He will not leave you alone in the aftermath of the courage it cost you to hold your testimony. He sought out the man born blind after the religious authorities were finished with him. He walked toward him in the very place where the rejection had landed. And he asked him, "Do you believe?" Not as a theological exam, as an invitation to something deeper than the sight itself, to the relationship that the sight was always meant to open the door to. You will not be left alone in what your testimony cost you. He is already walking toward the place where you are standing. And when he arrives, the only question he will ask is the simplest and most important one of all. And so before we close, let gratitude have its moment. The deep, hard-won gratitude of a person who has seen, really seen, and refused to unsee. Thank you for the mud, for the strange, undignified, unexplainable method you chose, not in spite of its strangeness, but perhaps because of it. Because the things that cannot be explained cannot be systematized and co-opted by the people who need to control the source of the grace. Thank you for sending me to wash, for requiring a movement of obedience before the sight arrived, so that the sight would be mine in a way that passive reception never produces. Thank you for the moment of coming back seeing, for the first faces, the first light, the first overwhelming evidence that the world I had only known through sound and touch was more beautiful than I had been told. Thank you for the interrogation, for the pressure that turned out to be the very thing that clarified what I actually believed. Thank you for the parents who stepped back, because their stepping back revealed that the testimony was mine to carry, and carrying it made it more fully mine than it would have been if someone else had carried it for me. Thank you for the expulsion that felt like loss and turned out to be a door, for the community I was cast out of that led me to the community I was always meant to belong to. Thank you for finding me afterward, for not leaving me alone in the place where the rejection landed, for walking toward me in the aftermath and asking not, "Are you okay? Are you managing? Are you surviving the cost of what you stood for?" but simply, "Do you believe?" Because that question reminded me that the sight was never the destination. It was the beginning of a seeing that goes deeper than eyes. I believe. Lord, I believe, and I will not unsee what you have shown me. Not for the comfort of the institution, not for the relief of the people who need my testimony to be less certain than it is, not for the approval of the room or the safety of the community or the tired, aching desire to belong somewhere that is making the pressure feel so powerful right now. One thing I know, and that one thing is enough to stand on for the rest of my life. I was blind and now I see, and I am not going back.